Good morning and welcome to Sunday Morning Online, May the 3rd. I appreciate those of you who meet me here on Sunday mornings now that we are social distancing and quarantined in many cases. Hopefully, moving toward some positive ways of getting away from this ultra destruction caused by the coronavirus. I'd like for you to think with me for a few minutes this morning about this topic: Jesus, public health, and quarantine. And we start with the word leprosarium. A leprosarium can refer to a hospital that provides care exclusively for patients with leprosy, which today is called Hansen's disease. Now, when leprosy is referred to in the Bible, and we're going to get to that today, leprosy might have referred to any number of skin diseases and disorders. But in our time, leprosy refers to Hansen's disease. Leprosarium may also refer to something much less than a hospital. It can refer to a leper colony where only lepers and those who come to minister to their physical needs and perhaps their spiritual needs come. I believe I am also correct in saying that a leprosarium, in a looser sense, can refer to an enclosure or some outdoor site, far, far from the mainstream where only lepers go, or more often are sent, frequently by law, to do the best they can surviving this once terminal disease, more or less on their own, possibly caring for others while they are less symptomatic and still have some strength to spare, but they are in absolute quarantine. Once officially diagnosed, all the lepers in Jesus' day would eventually end up in just this kind of situation. There might be occasions when Jesus encountered someone, and we may talk about one of those today, who hadn't had a complete official diagnosis yet, but suspected that she or he had leprosy. But once the diagnosis was made, the law required that the person go to one of these leper colonies where even their own family members could not come to visit them. And if some straggler got lost along the way and came toward the colony, they were required by law to yell out, "Leper! Leper!" To keep the person from coming close to them. They didn't have any idea how the disease was spread, and so complete, restrictive, presumably for life, quarantine was the only answer they had. So, as a kid growing up at the Beaver Dam Baptist Church in Halls Crossroads, and then going on to study at Carson Newman College and eventually Southern Seminary, I heard the stories about the lepers in the Bible many times, and teachers told me, and this included lay teachers at Sunday school and professional teachers, and I'm certainly not criticizing my teachers because I had the best teachers in the world. I'm the luckiest person in the world in terms of the teachers I was privileged to study with, but I'm just saying in this particular instance, when reference was made to leprosy, it was presented as something that was a problem in the ancient world in Jesus' time that had been taken care of, done away with by the time our place in history came along. Well, that turns out not to have been the case at all. What is true is that a cure for Hansen's disease was eventually discovered, but not terribly long ago. And it is not something, I believe, that goes completely away. It is something that is treatable, um, and that once someone has the disease, it is lingering uh, and must be treated right on through much of the rest of the person's life. That is certainly important to know. Turns out leprosy, Hansen's disease, is alive and well in the world today, right this minute, including in the United States. There are several hundred cases reported every year. There was an outbreak of Hansen's disease in Florida as recently as 2015. So it is by no means a dead disease, which should make our conversations about leprosy in Jesus' day a little more relevant to our way of thinking about what was going on then in connection to what is going on with us. Though leprosy was never an epidemic in the United States, it was a serious problem in various places. Um, and so leprosariums were built to address the problems, particularly in Louisiana, California, Hawaii. On this particular map, you see south of Baton Rouge a city called Carville. That is the only place a leprosarium was built that lasted for an extended period of time, from around the 1890s until, get this, 1999. I heard about it when I was pastoring St. Charles Avenue Baptist Church in New Orleans, from which for the pastorate from which I left in the early 90s. But I never made the trip over there, though I must only have lived an hour and a half or so from it. I wish I had taken the opportunity to go and see this place. You may recognize this outspoken political commentator, James Carville. The city of Carville, Louisiana, is named after his grandfather. Just a bit of not trivia, but not essential information, though I find it interesting. The most famous minister to lepers was Father Damien, who eventually was made Saint Damien. He ministered to lepers in Molokai, Hawaii. There's a peninsula area somewhere connected to that island that you see on the screen now. This is Father Damien close to the end of his life. He died at the age of 49 after serving the lepers for 16 years. He discovered after 12 years that he had Hansen's disease. And then 4 years later, he died with the disease that he had gone there to help treat as a spiritual counselor. Although there was so little medical attention available, he performed many functions that a medical person would normally have done, such as changing the dressings on the skin damage caused by the leprosy and such. There are two, at least, films out about Father Damien. He was quite the character, but what amazing commitment to people who were quarantined. This leprosarium closed 30 years earlier than the one in Louisiana. And the people were required, people who had leprosy were required to stay until 1969. There was some concern, it wasn't just a matter of control, some concern that the ones who were so disfigured with leprosy would not be accepted in society, and so it was safer and more compassionate to have them stay where they had been. Barely 2 weeks ago, it was announced in India that a leprosy treating drug would be tested as a possible drug to fight the coronavirus. How ironic and how amazing. So that announcement was made in India Times 2 weeks ago that this was beginning, the trials were beginning, presumably by now, thinking optimistically and thinking outside the context of the United States. This is happening. MW, the drug for treating leprosy, is being tested as a possible treatment for patients suffering with coronavirus difficulties. By the way, I think I just referred to the newspaper from which I got this information as India Times. I should have referred to India Today. Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. When Jesus had come down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and there was a leper who came to Jesus and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched the leper, saying, I do choose, be made clean. Immediately, the man's leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anybody, but go and show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. There are many artistic representations of this scene. I think this one is one of the best that I've come across for many reasons. Most importantly, the man who has leprosy is in a very early stage. He has not been diagnosed by the priest who made the designation in that time and place. A priest who had that as a responsibility. It was a very early stage, but recognizable to probably the man and maybe his family, and certainly to Jesus, who was a healer by profession. It was sort of like a matter of patient-physician confidentiality. So he's not bandaged and crippled as many of the lepers were, whom Jesus would encounter at a leper colony, bandaged up because their skin was already disintegrating, on crutches of some sort because limbs were already unusable. that kind of thing. So this man is in an early stage of leprosy. Um, and since I said a moment ago that leprosy in the biblical context referred to a number of skin diseases, there was no certainty perhaps that this one was going to become one of those terminal options, but certainly better to take no chances. Very important, I think, to distinguish between this man and the lepers we're going to talk about in a moment who were already in a quarantine situation. I would also mention here that it's a terrible artistic representation of Jesus. No one knows exactly what Jesus looked like, but this this was surely not not it. This is a good place to say that when we talk about healing stories in Jesus' life, that is, healing stories in the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it can be kind of tricky in terms of interpretation. And I'll say a little more about that in a moment. But it's very important to remember, if you happen to be someone listening who is dealing with an illness, or you have a loved one who is dealing with an illness, that if you're trying to use the life of Jesus as a paradigm, it is significant and necessary to take note of the fact that Jesus did not heal everyone with whom he came into contact, could not stretch himself thinly enough to heal all the people with whom he came into contact, since as far as we know, he did his healing work one person at a time. So when the multitudes would gather hoping for an opportunity to get up close to Jesus for an appointment, a medical appointment as it were, many of them, most of them would not see Jesus that day. And as far as we know, Jesus did no mass healings. Anyway, also important to remember that Jesus was not someone who considered himself as the source of healing. Jesus considered himself a catalyst through whom the power of God, or through whom the energy of God, worked to bring healing. And I think in terms of understanding Jesus' identity, that is something very important to state. So, more about all of this in a moment. Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 18. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him, keeping their distance. They called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. And then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked Jesus. He was a Samaritan. And then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? Where are the other 9? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Unlike the individual leper in the Matthew story we read earlier, here are 10, at least 10 lepers who are quarantined, who are in a leper colony, separated from the rest of society by law. And Jesus is going out to them, It's a big deal to Luke as a gospel writer to point out um, the double uncleanliness, I guess we would say, could say, about them. Not only were they lepers, but also from a Jewish perspective, they were racially unacceptable. They were Samaritans. This was not Jesus' point of view, but it was the point of view of a number of his contemporaries. So uh, Jesus healed not Jewish lepers in this case, but lepers from a group of people that many Jews thought weren't worth getting healed just because of their race. We have some racial issues in how the coronavirus is being regarded and treated right under our noses here. So he's on the way to Jerusalem, passes near Samaria, and the lepers come to him keeping their distance, and they have to call out saying, "We're lepers, it's unclean, keep your distance," and so forth. That's by law. Odd or interesting method of healing. Go and show yourselves to the priests, and by the time you get there, you will be well. Well, when you're sick, that sick, you'll take maybe about anything. They all took him at his word and started heading toward Jerusalem, I presume, where they would find the priest. Only one of them took time when he realized as he went toward Jerusalem that he was well. Only one of 10 took the time to turn back and come back and thank Jesus. Um, I have often thought that this thankful Samaritan leper was my favorite character in all of Scripture, um, because he realized how important it is to say thank you, um, and I guess that is one of the things that our parents instilled in us on a practical and a spiritual level. I really find this person outstanding. Um, the picture, the artistic representation of Jesus and the thankful leper in an African setting probably has the skin tone of Jesus and the Samaritan leper much closer to what was actual than many of the Americanized ones that make Jesus look like he you know grew up in New York or something like that in the 60s. Some lessons for today. Jesus was concerned about people's private health and public health. Followers of Jesus today, of necessity, will also be concerned about the private health and the public health of people. We can have all kinds of theological debates about Jesus and what Jesus taught, but one thing is absolutely indisputable, and that is the fact that Jesus gave most of his time, and I mean a huge percentage of his time, to trying to heal people who were sick. Jesus did not forget about those who were isolated from mainstream society, especially from their loved ones, due to medically and or legally required quarantine. Jesus followers today cannot, will not forget those who, in a quarantine situation, are not only um, required to be away from the mainstream, but who are forced into situations of quarantine that lead to loneliness and fear. Thank you to those in our community who are letter writers and email senders, those who are Meals on Wheels delivery people, even under these circumstances. Thanks to all of you in our community who watch out for those who are otherwise truly isolated in this time. Jesus believed that everybody who was sick deserved opportunities to be made well, though he understood too painfully well the limits of one healer's reach. People who follow Jesus today understand that those who are sick, regardless of their level of wealth or poverty, regardless of their ethnicity, whether they're a majority group or a minority group, deserve the same pathways toward the possibilities for wellness. Jesus took risks, real risks, trying to bring healing processes to the sick, even those with diagnoses so severe that others, including their loved ones and family members, had already given up on them. Also, Jesus didn't know when the next leper whom he encountered up closely might not be the one who would pass leprosy along to him. Those who think that Jesus was somehow shielded from the possibilities of sickness and disease himself have not understood who Jesus really was. Followers of Jesus today have utmost respect for those who take risks, who risk their health, indeed their own lives, to bring possibilities for health. I would also say those who are trying to get to people who are sick to bring spiritual health. But nonetheless, those who risk their lives to bring possibilities for health to those who are seriously sick in our time. Followers of Jesus support those who are taking these risks to the fullest possible extent. Thank you for joining me today. Prayers and positive thoughts for all of those who are struggling with the disease, coronavirus today, of course, many other illnesses as well, those who are on the front lines providing care for those who are sick. Absolutely, prayers and positive thoughts for them, for family members, loved ones who wait anxiously and patiently while loved ones struggle with the effects of the disease. I'll see you next week, next Sunday morning at 10. Blessings on you.